Bedtime stories for adults. If, like me, some of your fondest memories are of being tucked in and hearing a favorite story as you drifted off to sleep, you'll love this channel. Here, you'll find gentle bedtime readings of my own books, narrated by my assistant May, in a soft, soothing voice designed to help you relax. No jarring sound effects, no sudden noises, just calm, feel good stories to ease you into sleep. If you enjoy these stories and would like to support the channel, you can also find all of my books available on Amazon. Chapter number 16: Bears, Bears, and More Bears. Part 1 of 6. The dawn came the next morning. The sun was up, and so was I. Just finished cleaning up and shaving and pouring myself a mug of breakfast, when a deep-voiced Kylie announced herself from outside the door. Yowl, hiff, hiff, then a soft knock. "Come in, Kylie," I chuckled. She came in through a mutton leg in front of Chili, clapped, and said, "Up, Chili, we're burning daylight," then came over to me. "Good morning, Sergeant. Ready to go?" she asked. "Just finishing breakfast," I said, and held up my mug. "Have you eaten?" I asked. "Yes, about a half hour ago. Are you not packing your shaving kit, Sergeant?" she asked. "Not this trip, Kylie," I said as I gulped down my breakfast. Chili wandered outside, and Kylie and I followed mounted up and were off. Arriving at the campsite about an hour later, Kylie was eager to get things unpacked and set up, and with a little help from me, and even less help from Chili. The camp was set up, and even a pot of coffee hanging over the campfire within the hour. I had decided to busy myself with chopping down a tree and chopping up some firewood for the week. Chili had found himself a patch of butterflies, his favorite distraction. And Kylie, after sharpening every knife, saw, and sword in camp, got sick of waiting for my axe and took her new rod and tackle box down to the waterfall to try her luck. "It's still early. You see any bears, you high-tail it back here quick," I said as she passed. "I will," she said, and off she went, making me very jealous. I quickened my pace with the chopping so I could join her sooner. I thought a nice work song would hurry my task along, so in time with the swing of my axe, I started singing, "Row me, bully boys. We're in a hurry, boys. We've got a long way to go." A few courses and the tree was cut and firewood stacked. I grabbed my rod and tackle and I was off. Pulling up on the rock beside Kylie, I asked, "Any luck?" "I caught one, but it was too small, so I threw it back," she said. I tied a nice new yellow lure to my rod, stood and hoping to impress Kylie. I gave a mighty cast, only to have my lure go out 4 feet and come swinging back at my face. I ducked out of the way and noticed my lure was caught on me somewhere, so I started looking at myself trying to find my lure. Kylie, laughing, said, "Yellow is not your color, darling," then pulled out a black lure out of her tackle box and said, "Try black instead," and continued laughing. "What?" I said. "Your earring," she laughed and pointed at me. I felt my ear. Sure enough, the hook had gone through the lobe of my ear. Annoyed, I yanked it out. Kylie, still laughing, said, "Oh, sweetheart, you're going to ruin your ears that way." I tugged on my line, wondering why it was caught up, then opened my reel. Well, about 30 feet of line was bunched up inside my reel, and in the tangle about every foot was a nice, neat Bosman navy knot. "Didn't know whose rod was whose, huh?" I said out loud. Suddenly, I didn't feel so bad about the fish prank. Still chuckling, Kylie reached over and touched my ear, saying, "Your ear is bleeding, sweetie." "Leave it," I said and swatted her hand away, which made her laugh harder. Fixing my line and cutting away the knots, I handed Kylie the tangled line. "Tangled line? So?" she said. "Look at the knots," I said. "Yeah, Bosman knots?" "Bosman navy knots," I said. Oh, Daddy did that to your rod," she laughed. "Oh, Sergeant, you better hope that cut doesn't scar. You'll never hear the end of it," she said, laughing. "When I get in the academy, will I be able to pull tricks on Daddy too?" she asked. "If you get in the academy and you leave your father alone, he's mine," I said. "You get your own rival." She started laughing again, which put me in a better mood as well. As the sun rose high in the sky, we packed up our gear and what few fish we got, 2 trout and a small sagefish, and headed back to camp and maybe try an evening hunt later. Getting to camp, Chili was nowhere in sight. I yelled out for him, but nothing, so I cleaned the fish and gave them to Kylie to fillet and cook. About 10 minutes later, while I had an ale and Kylie was cooking lunch, a deer's head came rolling through camp with Chili right behind it. "Oh, I'm glad you had a nice lunch. Thanks for saving us some, buddy," I said to Chili as he went past. Chili circled around the camp and came back with the head in his mouth and dropped it beside Kylie, who was about to pick it up and throw it. Stop! Don't touch that head, Kylie, I ordered. Got up and went over, picked up the head, then went back and sat down and put it behind me. Then pointed my finger at Chili and said, "After lunch!" Chili turned around, pointing his ass at me, and Kylie then flopped in the dirt to sulk. After a nice lunch of fish and ale and a coffee, Kylie started gathering up the dishes. "Do you mind leaving them for now?" I asked. "We've got a sulking bear to deal with," I said, and picked up the head. "Okay, Kylie, you go over there, and when Chili comes back with the head, you try and touch him. If you do, yell 'caught,' drop it, and throw the head out further. If he gets to the camp, he wins." "Yay, okay," from Kylie. I walked over to Chili and said, "Chili football," and threw the head as hard and as far as I could. Chili took off like a shot after the head, and with Kylie on one side of the field and I on the other, Chili came prancing back with the hangling from what was left of one ear he had between his teeth. First, he would try Kylie, slowly prancing close to Kylie and waving the head back and forth. He waited for just the right second, and when she jumped to touch him, he turned and ran, and Kylie went into the grass. Thud! Then he would come for me, and I held out both hands to either side and taunted him. "You're not getting past me, you fat, slow bear!" And just as he was slowing down to weave from side to side, Kylie came running up from behind him, stole the head from out of his mouth, and took off like a shot, with Chili yowling after her. With the speed of a jackrabbit, Kylie tore through the tall grass, bobbing and weaving with Chili right on her tail. Then, in a move that gave both Chili and me a heart attack, she stopped dead and tucked herself into a ball. Chili leaped over her, landing on his face in the dirt, crashing hard enough to make a crater in the ground. Kylie popped up and started running straight for camp. I cupped my hands and said, "No, Kylie, don't!" But it was too late. She was in the camp and spiked the head in the dead fire pit and started dancing. Chili walked past Kylie, picked up the head and crushed it in his teeth, spraying Kylie with blood and deer brains, then flopped in the dirt to sulk. I walked past Kylie, who didn't care. She was full of blood and kept dancing, and said, "Nice job, Kylie. You're supposed to let him win," and grabbed a piece of firewood and walked over to Chili. "Chili, fetch!" and threw it. But Chili just turned his head. I looked at Kylie. "You caused this. You fix it," and walked away. "I'll do the lunch dishes." Gathering up the dishes, I watched, just a little too far away to hear what was being said, as Kylie went and sat beside Chili and tried to scratch his head. He turned his head away. She got up and sat on the other side of him and scratched his head, and he turned away again. She got up and went behind him and grabbed the fresh water pail, called him a big baby, and dumped the water on him, then dropped the pail on his head and took off running, with Chili right behind her. I smiled. It was good to see that bear get some of his own medicine. I leaned over to pick up the dishes and looked over at the river and crouched right away. A bear right there in the rapids fishing, a bit downstream. Not our alpha, but big, and all by himself. Keeping as low as I could, I crept over to the log I had been sitting on and grabbed my bow. Staying low and in tall grass as much as I could, I crept ever closer to the river and broke off a reed. The sound of Chili and Kylie screaming and playing in the field covered the small sound of the reed snapping nicely. So I snapped off the top about a foot up and blew out the sap, then slipped into the river with the reed in my mouth and an arrow notched on my bow. Slowly I moved under the river, keeping the bear in sight as the river bottom moved up higher and higher to the rapids, and I had to crouch lower and lower to stay underwater. A small cloud drifted past the sun, and I froze, hoping the shadow cast over the water would not give me away. It passed, and the reflection of the day returned to the surface of the water. At about 10 yards away, I couldn't move any closer. I had to take the shot from here. I started thinking to myself, "Okay, Don, you have to drop him in the water. He can't make the bank and leave tracks and a blood trail. It has to be a clean kill." I sprang to my feet and fired the arrow, hit near, but not in the heart. He turned to run. Quickly I notched another arrow, aimed and fired, and dropped him 2 feet from the bank. Then I crouched back down to look around and make sure there were no other bears to witness. Satisfied he was alone, I wanted to get him out of the river and back to camp quickly before any other bears showed up or the smell of dead bear hit the air. I stood on our side of the bank, holding my bow by its end and waving my arms in the air to get Kylie's and Chili's attention. Chili spotted me first and crouched low to the ground and started creeping toward me, and Kylie, smart girl that she is, crouched down behind him, keeping close. When they got close, Kylie could see the bear in the water, and she stayed crouched on the bank, and Chili came to me. "Go get the bear and bring it to Camp Chili," I said softly. Chili walked up to the bear, put its face in his mouth, crunched down with his teeth, and easily trotted back to camp with a 900-pound bear in his mouth. Kylie and I stayed low and quiet while moving away, for about 40 yards from the riverbank, then stood and walked back to camp. "That's one," I said with a smile. As we got closer to the camp, we could see Chili with the dead bear licking its belly. "Oh no," I said disappointedly, and I ran up to the bear, scooted Chili away from it, and from a crouched position beside the bear, I stood and yelled, "Fuck!" then hung my head and stood with my hands on my hips. "What?" Kylie asked worriedly. "What's wrong?" "Squeeze her nipple," I said, and I pointed to the bear. And she did, and a drop of milk came out. "Oh, a mother bear," Kylie said sadly. She then put her hand on my shoulder. "You couldn't have known, Sergeant. It's not your fault," she said. "Yeah, Kylie, go get the rope off my battle bear. I want to get her hung and gutted quickly. I have another job that has to be done after this." "Chili, grab the bear and follow me, please." Chili grabbed the bear by the head again and walked beside me till we reached the dead tree and hollow log about 40 yards from the camp. Kylie caught up to us and gave me the rope, and I told her to gather some stones and build a fire pit about 10 feet from the tree, then get some firewood from the camp, enough for the night. "After I gut this bear, we don't want any predators thinking it's a free meal," I said. Chili and I hung the bear, and I cleaned it. By that time, Kylie had the pit built and a nice-sized fire going next to the tree a little closer than I liked, but there was no wind that night, so it was fine. I picked up the bear's heart out of the pile of innards, a clean hole through the left side and a nick in the muscle on the right. I guess I was closer than I thought to myself. I looked at Kylie and asked, "Kylie, do you like bear liver?" She looked up at me from the fire, scrunched up her face, shook her head, and stuck out her tongue. "Okay, no," I said with a chuckle. Looking at Chili, I said, "Guess it's all yours, buddy. Bon appetit." And I walked away from the pile of innards. "Kylie, clean the dishes from lunch and make something for supper. I've got a job I got to do. I'll skin the bear in the morning and we'll make a smokehouse," I said. "Also, keep this fire going and keep an eye on our kill. You see any raccoons, foxes, or buzzards coming close, you put an arrow through them. Anything bigger, send Chili," I ordered, and grabbed my bow and left. I think Kylie knew what I had to go do, but neither of us would mention anything. It was hard enough to think I have to go kill an innocent baby bear for no fault of his own, except that I fucked up and killed his mama, let alone come out and say it out loud. I went over and over the trail. We spotted in my mind, and not a hint of club tracks. Admittedly, it was a little late in the year for cubs, so the thought really wouldn't cross my mind to look. And why wouldn't Chili say anything to Kylie about cubs? He must have smelled them. He's refused to kill and saved other baby animals before. Why would this time be different? I searched for the cub till well after sunset. Each time I found myself hoping I wouldn't find it. I reminded myself what the pain of an empty belly feels like. How every muscle in your body starts to ache stronger and stronger as it breaks down, even the emotional torture you go through as your mind slowly goes insane. No, I would not wish that on any animal, let alone a baby. It was getting dark, and I decided to go back to camp, and I would search again tomorrow. I got back to camp, and Kylie was lying on the other side of Chili watching the fire by the kill with her thick, warm blanket draped over the two of them. I poured myself an ale and sat by the fire. "Any luck?" Kylie asked quietly. "Depends on how you look at it, I guess," I said. Angrily, she said, "Did you kill it?" "I couldn't find it," I said. She got up and came over and sat by me. "Maybe it went back to its sleuth?" she said hopefully. "Maybe, But if Chili's right and the leader is female, she'll kill it because it's not hers. And my arrow is a lot less painful than a loved one's claws, of course. She will save me the ugly task. I said, taking a sip of my ale. Your dinner's in the pan. Shall I heat it up? No. Thank you, Kylie. I'm not hungry, I said, taking another sip. What did you make anyway? I asked. Oh, I got lucky. I went back fishing, and with your blood-soaked yellow lure, I caught 3 nice salmon around 8 pounds each. One's in the pan for you. The other 2 went to Chili. For a wild bear, he sure knows how to beg, she said and smiled. I laughed. For salmon? Yeah, he'll beg. My yellow lure, huh? I want that back, you know. I said, nope, she said. Stolen by the fishing fairies, who hid it away where no king's guard will ever find it. Besides, even after being in the water and in the mouth of 3 nice salmon, there is still a tiny drop of your blood visible right where the hook meets the lure. I may sell it to Daddy, or give it to him for his name day. She smiled, almost laughing. You do, young lady, and king's guard or not. I'll throw you over my knee and redden your behind, I warned. You sure you don't want that salmon? She asked. No, sweetie. You'll need your strength. Tomorrow's a big day. Lots of work, I said and took another sip of my ale. You should smoke a cigar. You should smoke a cigar. That always puts you in a good mood, she said. Don't have any. Left them at home. The smell carries on the wind too much, and I didn't want to be tempted. Oh, so you didn't want them? She sheepishly asked. No, why? I asked with concern. Well, why, Kylie? Now I was getting annoyed. She reached into her travel bag and pulled out my cigar box. I thought you just forgot them, and I'd surprise you, she said. I smiled and chuckled. Give me those. Thank you, Kylie, I said, shaking the box. Then I opened it and said, Want one? With a smile. If you're going to be a dog face, Kylie, you gotta get used to cigars, I said. She reached in and took one. Then I did as well. Oh, Kylie, get rid of the fish. For now, cigars and food do not go well together, I warned. I grabbed a match out of the cigar box and lit both our cigars. I watched her as she took a few puffs, then leaned back with one hand behind her, cocked her head in the air, and took a long drag. You know, Sergeant, I could get used to this, she said as she looked at me. I openly laughed and said, Good. Ale? I asked. Yes, please, she replied, and I poured us each a mug. She took a sip of her ale and a puff of her cigar and said, Despite the unfortunate circumstances, that's a big bear. I'll bet Mom can get 2 months' worth of meals out of that. Oh, Kylie. And such a good hunt, too. That's only the second time in my life I used that tactic. On a bear, anyway. Shame. Oh, Kylie. I meant to ask, why were you sleeping outside? I asked and turned to her. Well, 1, you told me to keep an eye on that fire over there. And 2, Chili wouldn't come in the tent, the big baby. And she took a puff of her cigar. So you're going to be sleeping outside with Chili and me? I asked. If you don't mind, Sergeant, she said, looking at me. No, but it does give me an idea of how we can use that tent and save ourselves a lot of work. We enjoyed our cigars and ale. Kylie ate her supper, and we turned in for the night. Each of us on one side of Chili, and since Kylie had fire watch for the first half of the night, I took the second and went over and stacked a good amount of thick logs onto the fire so I could get a few hours shut-eye. When I awoke, the sky was just getting light, but the sun was not up yet. I opened my eyes and noticed the fire was out. Kylie, fire's out. It's daytime. Your watch. I closed my eyes. No answer, no movement, and no sound other than Chili's snoring. Kylie, I repeated. I sat up and looked on the other side of Chili. Kylie was gone. I got up and put my hand on the ground on the other side of Chili. It was cold. I grabbed my bow and ran to the riverbank looking for her. Then I heard, Good morning, Sergeant, from the waterfall. I turned, and there was Kylie taking a shower, fully naked. This person I had been treating like a little girl was anything but. The fully formed figure of a beautiful woman stood before me. I was starting to regret I didn't ask her to marry me. Remembering myself, I turned my back to her. Good morning, Kylie. You were gone, so I came looking for you. Oh, don't get shy on me now, Sergeant. I've seen you in the bath and faced you when you spoke, she said with a hint of humor in her voice. I don't have your gifts, I replied. She laughed. Well then, me and my gifts are coming over to give you a big hug and kiss. I heard her running towards me. Kylie, stop, I ordered and pointed at the camp. Go get dressed. But to no avail, for there she was naked and wrapped around me and kissing my neck. Kylie, you're cold and wet. Get off me and go get dressed. I love you too, she said, kissed me again, turned, and headed for the camp. As I watched her walk away, she said, "Stop looking at my ass, Sergeant," and then laughed to herself. I gave Kylie a few minutes to get dressed and then headed back to camp, but first stop was my kill, since I didn't know how long the fire was out. I got there, knelt down by the pit, and held my hand over it. Ouch! Okay, maybe it's not out. And I threw a log on, flames immediately. Good, I said out loud, then took a good look at my kill. The smoke worked well. The pelt was pulling away from the meat easily. I went back to the camp to get my skinning knife, freshly sharpened by Kylie yesterday. I grabbed my knife, then thought of my idea from last night, and with Kylie at the lake doing the dishes from last night, I thought it no better time than to bring it to life. The large blue tent that said Navy on each side had a very small canvas door that tied closed. Inside was quite spacious with a 6-foot ceiling and a large 6-foot canvas floor. I proceeded to cut a 4-foot circumference circle out of the center of the floor, and in the back of the tent on the floor, from one side to the other, I cut out the letters ARMY. And with the grass now revealed under the tent, it made the letters such a pretty shade of green. Coming out of the tent, Kylie was still washing dishes, so I went and gathered an armful of rocks, came back, and placed them in a circle, just inside the cutout circle in the center of the tent. When I came out, Kylie was just putting the dishes away and making coffee. I smiled and headed over to the woodpile. Grabbed the smallest pieces of cut wood, some splinters, and a handful or two of leaves I saved off the tree in a pile. Then went back into the tent. "What are you doing?" Kylie asked. "Be right out," I said. I came out and said, "Oh, Kylie, string some lines of twine from one side of the tent to the other and light that fire, but keep it very small. Oh, and really good job on the skinning knife, really sharp," I said as I walked towards my kill to go skin it. From behind me, I heard a scream, then a laugh. Then Kylie yelled to me, "Daddy's going to kill you," laughing. My knife went through the bear hide like butter, and the pelt just pulled away from the meat. What was usually an hour or more of hard work was 15 minutes of light work. I must remember this trick, I said to myself. Walking back from my kill with the hide in my arms, Kylie was just coming out of the tent. "Did you get those lines strung?" I asked. "Yes, and the fire's going too, and it's working beautifully as a smokehouse, but Daddy's still going to kill you," she chuckled. "Oh, Kylie, this little trick of ours is probably going to really stink up your father's tent. Remind me to set it up in the backyard to air out when we get back to the inn." I smiled. "Oh, now, you're just asking for it," she said, while flat out laughing. Grabbing the bone saw and carving knife, I walked over to Kylie and gave her a choice. Holding the bone saw and carving knife in one hand and the pelt in the other, I asked, "Clean, scrape, stretch and tan the skin, or butcher the bear?" "I have the choice," she asked. "You do," I said with a smile. "Oh, I'll take the skin, and I'll be over to sit and sip on my ale and watch you cut up that bear as soon as I'm done," I laughed and said. "You know, Kylie, the smoke from a good cigar goes well with the smell of sweat from someone rubbing salt into a hide. I'll be over to watch you sweat and smoke my cigar after I've cut and hung my bear meat." We both smiled and headed our separate ways. I yelled back, "Mind the job you do on that pelt. It very well may be a winter's festival gift for your mother." And she got me back with, "Chili go with Sergeant. He'll give you breakfast." Now, Kylie would have been right to take the pelt if I had to butcher the bear properly. Cutting away all the muscles from the bones, manipulate the tendons, to properly butcher this bear would take all day. But this was a field strip, and we wanted this meat in that smokehouse quick. Now that the pelt is off it. So the longest part of the job would cost me 1 arrow, maybe 2. Let me break it down for you. Now that the fire was dead and cold, the rocks and ashes was the best germ-free area to work. Dirty, but germ-free. Pushing the rocks together to form 2 lines instead of a circle gave me a low makeshift table to work on. Starting with a leg, cutting to the bone at the top of the leg, following the natural tendon that goes through the groin up and over the leg and under the buttocks to complete the circle around the leg. Pushing the meat down and away from the femur just below the joint, cut the femur with the bone saw and take your leg to your work area. Using the distance between your outstretched pinky and thumb should give you 5 to 7 inches. Slice through the meat to the bone all the way around at these intervals till you reach the paw. Now grab the bone saw and cut through the bone at every sliced area, giving the foot, ankle, knee, and elbow to your polar bear. Now the long part, turning each roast with the bone facing up. With a rock or the handle of your knife, drive a sharp arrow through the soft marrow of the bone to the other side. Take the head off the arrow, tie a long piece of twine through the notch in the arrow and around the shaft, and pull it back through the hole. Tie and loop both ends of the twine together at the top, and there you have one field roast ready to hang. Repeat 15 to 20 times. Cut off the ribs at the backbone from the bottom up, and cut into groups of 4 or 5 ribs. Stack them and shoot an arrow with twine tied to the end of it through the ribs in the middle. Pull the arrow and twine through the ribs, tie the ends together, and separate your rib pieces with knots in the twine, and your stacks of ribs are ready to hang. Cut off the buttocks roasts and the inside flank steaks along the backbone. Drop the head, spine, and hip bone off the tree and feed it to your polar bear. I did this one in 3 hours. Then took all the meat in 4 separate trips to hang in the smokehouse. After hanging the meat, I was tempted to go run up to Kylie and rub in my victory, but I knew she'd still be a while, so remembering her shower in the falls and how refreshing it looked, I decided to enjoy one myself. Going back to camp after my shower and putting on a fresh set of buckskins, I spied Kylie's half cigar she was saving, on a rock by the fire. I took it and lit it and said out loud, "Sorry, kid, such is the spoils of war." I then grabbed an empty bucket and a mug of ale and headed off to see Kylie. Coming up behind Kylie, who was trying so hard to rub the salt into the pelt stretched over the rack, I said, "I love the smell of cigar smoke and sweat in the morning," and smiled. "How'd you get finished so quick?" she asked. "So quick, Kylie, it's almost noon." I chuckled and took a puff of my cigar. "You've been at this for 5 hours. The salt won't take," she said. "I rub, and it won't take." That's because Kylie, unlike deer or rabbit or fox, bears have a lot of oil in their skin here. Feel the fur on the other side. Even clean and still a bit wet, you can feel the oil in it. I put down the bucket and flicked my ash off my cigar, then put it back in my mouth and continued. "No, with a bear you have to wash it, scrape and stretch it, then let it sit in the sun for a day or 2 before you can tan it," I said, smiling with my cigar in my mouth. "You knew this?" she asked. I nodded. "And you still let me waste my time for the past 2 hours or so scrubbing this skin?" she asked, and put her hands on her hips. "Oh, I figured since you said you'd come to watch me work, you knew a trick, being a country girl and all," I said, teasing. "Well, I hope the ale is for me. But what is the bucket for?" she asked. "There's no store around here, Kylie. We can't waste anything," I said. "Yeah, so," she said. "Look at your feet," I instructed. She looked down and realized the salt she had been trying to rub into the skin rolled off and was a pile at her feet, covering a good part of the toes of her boots. "That can't be good for your boots," I said. Jumping out of the salt and trying to wipe off her boots, I handed her the ale, saying, "Drink your ale, clean up the salt, and for God's sake go clean your boots, and I'll meet you back at camp for lunch." And I headed back to camp. "Since when does a dog-face smoke his cigar in the morning?" she yelled. "It isn't mine. Found it by the fire," I yelled back. "I was saving that," she yelled. Again I said, this time much louder, "Sorry, kid, such is the spoils of war." Kylie showed up at the camp about 15 minutes later in bare feet, wet boots slung over her arm and a bucket of salt in her hand. I was crouched down by the fire cooking lunch in a cast iron frying pan Kylie brought. That smells good, Sergeant," she said as she put down the salt and hung up her boots. "But mind that pan. The mother will have your head." She smiled and poked her head in the smokehouse to take a look. "Holy crap, that's a lot of meat," she stated. "Yeah, if we bag another bear, it better be a small one, or this is going to be a very short trip," I said, stirring the pan. Just then, Chili showed up and flopped himself on the ground beside Kylie. "Where have you been?" I asked. "Snore," from Chili. "Ew, Sergeant, his face is all yellow and goopy," Kylie said. I got up and leaned over the fire and ran my finger up Chili's snout. Smelled it and popped my finger in my mouth. "Oh!" from Kylie. Pulling my finger out of my mouth, I said, "Yup, honey." "Oh, he'll be out for the day. That many bee stings. The poison? Yup, he's out for the day." I chuckled. And when Kylie thought I wasn't looking, she tasted the honey off Chili's snout, too. "Now, Kylie, tomorrow he's going to be trying to rub his face against trees and logs to stop the itch. Don't let him. You see him doing that, you stop him," I ordered. "Tell him to go fish. The cool water of the river will help the itch, and he won't be tearing half his face off." "Okay." From Kylie. "Give us your plate. Lunch is ready," I said with a smile. "Smells so good. What is it?" Kylie asked. "Ha, not something you'd normally get on a camping trip, that's for sure. Bear tenderloin, one of the inside flank steaks on the inside of the rib cage along the backbone," I said and portioned half onto her plate. "A good 4 gold a plate, meal there in Stormwind." I smiled. "I hope you don't mind. I went through your kitchen pack and took a clove and a bit of garlic," I said. "Oh, I don't mind at all," said Kylie while eating her lunch. "You can cook as much as you want if it's this good." "Don't count on it," I said. "While we wait for your boots, Kylie, after lunch, one last small pile of leaves on the fire, then let it smolder out for the afternoon and let the smoke do its job. I thought we'd drown a few worms, then, when it's good and hot this aft, go take a look at that trail, find a good spot for a blind. And from this point on, if Chili's with us or not, I want you to have your bow on you at all times." "Okay," I instructed. A muffled, "Yes, Sergeant," from Kylie with a mouthful of food. After lunch, Kylie took the dishes and the pan down to the falls to clean them. I put another small pile of leaves and a few sticks on the fire in the smokehouse, grabbed our fishing gear and my bow, and headed down to join Kylie. Reaching the river, I said to Kylie, "I could make out the King's Guard seal on your bow a good 5 yards back. That alone is going to change the way people look at you and talk to you, Kylie," I said with pride. As we spent the afternoon fishing, I instructed Kylie how she would have to look and act if she got into the King's Guard, how people would treat her differently, but above all, how to stay humble and approachable but authoritative when need be. We were having such a good time fishing, I kind of blew off the idea of scouting for a blind. Besides, there was always tomorrow. Late in the afternoon, we got a little cloud cover, which was great for fishing. We were catching sunscale salmon and trout and greater sagefish and even yellowtail, believe it or not. I said to myself out loud, "I gotta remember this spot." Just then, we got even more luck. I looked down the river, and there was another bear fishing in the rapids, exactly where I got the first one. But this one would be Kylie's, I told myself. Putting down my rod and tapping Kylie to get her attention, I pointed at the bear. "You remember how I told you I did it?" I whispered. She nodded and slowly put down her rod and took her bow off her back and notched an arrow. While she did, I broke a reed at both ends, blew the sap out of it and put it in her mouth, and she quietly slipped into the river. I notched an arrow and stayed on the river bank about 10 yards behind Kylie as she slipped downstream, her bright white feet all you could see of her in the water. Creeping along in the tall grass beside the river, I kept switching between watching Kylie and looking out for bears. I kept debating in my mind if I'd interfere or not. If Kylie didn't drop the bear in the stream, and it made it to the bank, we'd lose this spot and possibly lose the sleuth completely. But if I interfered and took the shot myself, I'd lose Kylie's trust. So I told myself if she missed, we'd let it go. I'm not losing a good friend over a hunting trip. She inched her way closer and closer to the bear fishing in the rapids as I kept a good 10 yards back watching and keeping a lookout. The suspense in the air was even greater than when I did this hunt the day earlier. I was enjoying myself immensely. Kylie was almost to the spot where I popped out of the water the day before. I studied the bear now that I was close enough to get a good look. The slope of the head, the thick brow. This was a male. A smaller male, but still a male. I was happy my friend would not have to go through the anguish I did and was still dealing with if she killed this bear. In a flash, Kylie popped out of the river and fired. I raised my bow instinctively, but then dropped it, remembering my promise to myself. Kylie's arrow hit its target, and the bear dropped dead perfectly in the middle of the river at the rapids. "Yay!" from Kylie. "Shh!" from me. Quickly, We have to get that bear out of the water and on our side of the river before any others show up, I quietly said to Kylie. You stay there and cover me. Kylie notched another arrow. With my bow drawn, I quickly but quietly moved to the fallen bear and made sure he wasn't just playing possum and really was dead. Satisfied he was dead, I put my bow on my back and waved over to Kylie to come help. When she got to me, I quietly said, Grab an arm, and pointed to a patch of really tall grass on our side of the river. With Kylie on one of the bear's arms and me on the other, we dragged the bear out of the water and into the tall grass. Quietly, I said, Great shot, Kylie. Now run back to camp, grab your boots, and wake up Chili and bring him back here. I'll stay here with your kill. I smiled and waved her off, and she smiled back and took off like a shot. I took a good look at this male she got. About a 3-year-old, maybe about 400 pounds, beautiful black coat and a good 6-inch claws on him. I was very proud of Kylie dropping him with one shot. His face was underwater fishing when she got him, so I don't even think he saw her. Kylie came skipping back with a very wobbly and grumpy-looking Chili. You could tell the bee venom had not worked its way out of his system yet. I held up my arm to Chili, then closed my fist when he got close, and he crouched low to the ground and crept the rest of the way to me. Kylie followed Chili's lead and did the same. With my hand on Chili's head, scratching his ear to tell him he did good, I took one last look around for bears and said quietly, Chili, drag this bear to the tree, same as yesterday. Chili, not in the playful mood he was in yesterday, grabbed the bear by its face, chomped his teeth into its skull, and dragged it on the ground under him to the tree. Quickly and roughly, like it was the bear's fault we woke him up. Truthfully, I'd rather have Chili pissed at a dead bear instead of Kylie or me. Again, Kylie and I kept low and quiet till we got about 40 yards from the river, then headed straight for the dead tree and bear. That was a great shot, Kylie, and with his face in the water, I don't even think he knew you were there, I complimented. He didn't. I waited till he put his head back in the water on purpose. If I had have seen his eyes, I think I would have heard his thoughts, and either not shot or missed, she said, smiling and looking very proud of herself. Either way, I'm proud of you. Are you ready to gut your first bear? I asked. I was kind of hoping you would do that for me, Sergeant, she said with a squeak in her voice. Not a chance, I chuckled. As we arrived at the dead tree, the rope still hung from yesterday for another night's work. By the time we got to the tree, Chili had already stomped his way back to the campsite and plopped himself down by the fire and was again snoring away. The dead bear was beside the tree, and I looked at Kylie and said, Looks like we're going to have to hoist him up there ourselves. I don't want to wake Chili again, do you? Kylie looked at me and with a big shake of her head said, No, then smiled. The rope with the noose was still rolled up and hanging from the tree branch where I left it earlier that day. I put the noose around the bear's neck and we pulled it to the front of the tree. Then I threw the rope up and over the tree between the two thick Y-shaped branches at the top. Okay, Kylie, I'll lift you, pull. Get around the other side of the tree and yell when you're ready, I instructed. She ran around the other side of the tree and yelled. Ready. Okay, Kylie, pull. I grunted as we moved the bear to an upright sitting position against the tree. And again, pull. Now the bear was standing against the tree. Okay, good. Kylie, pull. Now the bear was just a few inches off the ground and I pressed my body against it to hold it there. Kylie, by your foot, there's a root sticking out of the ground. Loop the rope through it and hold the weight while I get under the bear. Okay, done. From Kylie. I slowly let go of the bear, and when it didn't move, I crouched to the ground, put my back against the tree and the bear's legs on my shoulders. Okay, Kylie, one last huge pull, and I'll hold the bear while you tie off the rope. Ready? I asked. Yeah, from Kylie. Pull! And we got the bear up the tree to about a waist-high height off the ground. Tie it quickly, I strained. Tied, Kylie yelled. I stepped away, and the bear dropped a wee bit, but still lots of room underneath it. Good. Done, I said, bent over with my hands on my knees, taking a few deep breaths. Kylie came around the tree to look at our work and said, Well, that was easy. Speak for yourself, I said. Since Chili was not awake to eat the bear innards, and I didn't want them on the ground all night, I sent Kylie over to the camp to grab the canvas I cut out of the tent floor, and we laid it right under the bear next to the tree. I instructed Kylie how to gut the bear and made her repeat my instructions a few times. Even made her show me with a stick to substitute for a knife, for if she nicked the stomach or the gallbladder, the meat inside the chest cavity would be ruined. Once she had it perfect, I gave her my skinning knife to use, and I'd build the campfire pit and stalk and light it like we did the night before. There was enough daylight left to skin and cut up the bear, but the smoke trick worked so well and made the skinning job so easy. It would be worth another night of fire watch. I finished making and lighting the fire. Kylie did a wonderful job gutting the bear. We grabbed the canvas with all the innards and carried it over to Chili and laid it out in front of him while he slept. With the heart sitting right on top, I picked it up and showed it to Kylie, where the arrow left its hole right through the middle of the heart. That bear was dead before it hit the ground, Kylie. Good work. Then, honoring an old tradition, I stuck 2 fingers in the arrow hole and then rubbed the blood on both Kylie's cheeks. Forgetting what my grandfather said when he did the same to me, I recited an old dwarven prayer I heard my mother say 1,000 times. It sounded very ritualistic, and Kylie bought it, smiling ear to ear, so we went with that. "You are now a huntress, my sister," I said. "Now go take a shower, you look like crap and smell as bad." I chuckled as I threw the heart back on the pile. "Chili, eat that," I said, "before it starts to stink." Without even getting up or opening his eyes, his paw came out, grabbed the canvas, and pulled it to his face, slurping the whole thing down like a plate of spaghetti and meatballs. "That is one lazy bear," I said to myself out loud while pouring an ale. Plopping my ass on the ground beside the fire and with my back against Chili's back leg, I took a sip of my ale. Over my mug, I noticed our fishing gear leaned up against the tent. "That's right," I thought to myself, "we were fishing. So where's the fish?" I put down my ale on a rock around the fire, got up and poked my head in the smokehouse. "No fish!" Then started looking all over the camp. Just then, Kylie came jogging back to camp buck-ass naked, except for her bow and quiver across her back, with her wet clothes and boots in her arms. "Get dressed," I ordered. "Relax, Sergeant. I'm just hanging my buckskins and boots over the fire, and I'll put on some jeans and a shirt in a minute," she said. "Not a minute now," I said, and sat back down in my spot and grabbed my ale. Taking a sip, I said, "Thank you for grabbing the fishing gear, but, where's the fish?" "I gave them to Chili," she said as she hopped into her pants. "There was like 12 good-sized fish there," I said, annoyed and sitting up straight. She put on a shirt, poured an ale, and sat beside me on the other side of the fire, leaning against Chili's neck and shoulder. Chili was having a real hard time staggering to his feet, so I laid out the fish in a row, one after the other, till he was up. By the time he was standing, there was only one left, so I put it down for him, she explained. We'd still be dragging that heavy bear across the field without him, so I say, "It was worth it, wouldn't you, Sergeant?" she asked as she sipped her ale. "That was our supper," I said. "I'm pretty sure Mom can spare a rump roast for us out of her meat in the tent," she replied. "It's not hers yet?" "And you're cooking," I said, leaning back on my bear, smoking my cigar and sipping my ale and smelling Kylie's wonderful cooking over the fire. I started to feel better about losing a yellowtail dinner to my bear. I found myself wondering what the future held for this amazing young lady. If she got into the King's Guard, I have no doubt in my mind she'll not only make it, but end up a great leader someday. And if not, with her drive and abilities, she would be destined to do something just as great. In a lot of ways, she reminded me of Nimicie and how she would astound me daily. Maybe that's why I was so invested in Kylie. Maybe I saw it as a way to somehow right a wrong I've done. Either way, I was feeling very privileged to have known both of them. Though my heart still yearned for Nimicie, spending time with Kylie sure was a great distraction. As I sat there with my belly rumbling, I started thinking of the ugly task that truthfully I had been avoiding all day. I decided to keep my belly empty and go do what had to be done. Go find that baby bear. Gulping down my ale and putting out my cigar, I told Kylie I'd be back and to keep an eye on the fire by the kill. Crossing the river at the rapids, I followed the bear trail, listening and looking for any sign of that cub. Staying just off the trail, I followed it back to where we first spotted it. Then another 15 minutes after that, when I spotted a cave. That must be their den, I thought. I circled around to the side of the cave, is sure to stay downwind, and got about 20 yards from the entrance, watching and waiting, with an arrow notched across my bow. Not that I'd be foolish enough to take on a sleuth of bears, diminished as they are in their own home, but I was just hoping to catch a glimpse of a youngster, if for no other reason but to ease my mind. A mid-sized male came out and started rolling in a shady spot of grass just outside the cave. I ducked low behind the dead log that was in front of me. Then I saw her as she lumbered out of the cave. A huge sow, a good 1,500 pounds and almost as tall as Chili in the shoulders. A beautiful shiny black coat, the color of ebony. She came around to the front of the male and headbutted him to get him back in the cave. She knew there was danger around, and she'd be keeping her sleuth close to home now. As they went inside, I knew I would not catch a look at any more bears tonight, so I slowly and quietly backed away and returned to camp. The sun had set by the time I got back to camp, and Kylie was sitting cross-legged in front of Chili, who was awake and was getting his face washed with soap and water, and didn't like it one bit. "Sit still, Chili," Kylie said as she was getting frustrated. "Your dinner is in the pan." She then said to me as I walked by. I dipped my finger in the water bucket she was using to clean Chili, hot water. "Kylie, have you no heart?" I chastised. "Under that honey you're trying to clean off have to be at least 1,000 bee stings." I grabbed the pan and a fork and started eating. Oh, I'm so sorry, Chili. I'll go get the cold water right now." She apologized and dumped the water and ran off with the bucket to the river. Chili put his head down and hiffed a few times. "Oh, like you've never made a mistake," I said with a mouthful of food. "She's just trying to help you." "Yowl," from Chili, and he got a very familiar look. Quickly, I put down the pan and ran over to him. "No, you don't, not here. Come on, Chili, up, up," I ordered as I started pushing on him. Chili stood, took 3 steps, and Ralph vomited all over the camp. A sickly sweet smell of rotten meat, fish, and honey hit the air. "Okay, buddy, go finish down there, go," I ordered. And he wandered away from the camp in the direction of the river just as Kylie came back with the bucket. "Ew," she stated, holding her nose. I took the bucket and poured the water on the puke to dilute it, then gave her the bucket, saying, "10 more, please." After a futile attempt at hosing down the camp with water buckets, I said to Kylie, "Grab what you need for the night. We're moving." "To where?" Kylie asked. "Over to the cleaning tree. It's got to smell better than this," I said, and I took the last bucket of water, my dinner, and the dwarven ale and headed over. Kylie grabbed her blanket, a few clothes, and the mugs, and the rest of my cigar off the rock at the campfire and followed me. Chili came prancing up beside me and yowled and hiffed. "Feel better, buddy?" I asked. "Yowl," from Chili. Then he ran to the new camp to claim his spot by the fire. "I think you'll be able to clean his face now, Kylie," I said as I smiled. "And while you're at it, brush his teeth." Chuckling, I quickened my pace to the camp. Reaching the cleaning tree, the kill didn't smell that bad at all, and I was glad I left a good-sized stack of wood over here for the fire. I threw on a nice-sized log and sat and finished my dinner while Kylie cleaned Chili's face and neck and, astonishingly enough, his collar. "Look, Sergeant, I think your little talk worked. He's not saying boo about me touching his collar," she said and smiled. I chuckled and said, "Under it all, Kylie, be it mouse, man, or polar bear, all boys are mama's boys." And we laughed. We had a few ales, shared the rest of my cigar, and tucked in for the night. Kylie took off her bow and quiver and put it beside mine at my head, then wedged herself between me and Chili, and covered all 3 of us with her warm blanket, kissed the back of my neck, and went to sleep. The sky was just starting to turn light as I woke, and I lay there for a few minutes watching the stars disappear into the sky. Then I reached to my side to throw the blanket off me and stopped. The ground was warm, and the blanket flat as if something had been sleeping with us. Slowly, I reached for my bow, grabbed it, and the quiver, and sat up quick. Nothing anywhere in sight. Well, whatever it was, it's gone now. I couldn't fault Chili, he was sick and still working out the poison. So I decided to let it go and just appreciate the extra warmth. I got up to put my quiver and my bow on my back, stuck my head in the bucket of water and shook it off, then yelled, "Up, everyone! We're burning daylight!" Heading to the keg for breakfast, I put my mug under the tap. Nothing came out. I shook the keg empty. "Kylie, who drank the last ale?" I asked. Rubbing her eyes and yawning, she said, "You did." Oh, right. I said, "Okay, well, I know a trick. Up to everyone, we're bugging out." I ordered as I put the keg under my arm, picked up the bucket, and marched over to the other camp. Getting there, I grabbed my hatchet, put down the keg on the ground, and pulled out the tap. Then proceeded to tap the top of the wooden keg with the hatchet and turn the keg a quarter turn each time I hit it until the lid popped inside. Just then, Kylie showed up with the 2 mugs in the pan. "Ah, good timing. Hold out the mugs." Kylie put down the pan and held the mugs one in each hand. I put my hand in the keg and pushed the lid to the bottom of the keg and poured what came out between the 2 mugs. "Ew, what is that?" Kylie asked. "That, my dear, is splurge, very bitter and thick, but it will wake you up in the morning," I said with a smile. "Bottoms up." She handed me her mug and said, "I'll stick with coffee." Kylie put the pan on the fire and threw in a good handful of sage and 3 full wedges of garlic right off the clove in it to get rid of what was left of that sickly sweet scent in the air, then threw in a little bear grease and some thin slices of bear roast, and breakfast was underway. "What are we doing today, Sergeant?" she asked as she cooked. "Well, that all depends. But first we're going to skin and field cut your bear, then see if our poor tent can hold it all. If not, you're going to be doing a lot of cooking while I clean pelts and get this camp packed up so we can leave tonight and come back tomorrow with fresh supplies and -7 or so hundred pounds of meat," I said while finishing off the splurge. "And if the tent does hold the meat," Kylie asked, "then we let the smokehouse do its magic for the day and we go fishing. I want to keep Chili close today to keep an eye on him, and we'll slowly pack up what we don't need for the night. Spend the night, and then pack up the meat and skins and possibly the tent and go home. This was a short trip, but a very good one," I said with a smile. "No more hunting, Sergeant?" Kylie asked. "Well, not from here. Unless you want to track an hour through dark bush, an hour before sunrise every morning," I said. And with a puzzled look from Kylie, I continued. "I spied their cave last night on my walkabout. That sleuth leader is huge, almost as big as Chili, but she's keeping what's left of her family very close to home," I said as I held out my plate for some of that bear. "No, I think it's best to take what we got and plan another scouting trip in a few weeks. A greedy hunter, starve come winter, Kylie," I said. "Speaking of, Sergeant, did you find it?" Kylie asked quietly. "No, and I'm starting to think there never was a cub. Maybe it died in childbirth. Maybe the alpha ate it, but there are no signs of a starving baby bear anywhere," I said, with enough conviction that even I believed it. Chili got up to wander off for a drink at the river, and Kylie put her foot out on the end of the blanket and pulled it off him as he walked away. Then from behind us, just at the top of the small hill, "I thought I'd find you two here," was yelled down. "Daddy!" Kylie yelled and ran up the hill to greet her father. Floggin was leading a mule and small pony cart. As he hugged his daughter and continued heading into camp, "Good morning, Sergeant. Mind if I join you for breakfast?" "No, please. Welcome, Floggin," I said. "I thought you may be in need of a few supplies, flour, tarps, salt, fresh clothes for Kylie, and a keg of dwarven ale, Sergeant," Floggin said as he found an empty stump to sit on. "Here, Daddy. Take mine, I'll make more," said Kylie as she handed her father her plate. "Thank you, Pumpkin," from Floggin. "Navy to the rescue, huh?" I said with a smile. "As always, Sergeant," Floggin smiled back, and started eating his bear tenders. "That's a little spicy, honey," from Floggin. "We had a little problem with air pollution this morning, Floggin. Kylie solved it with some garlic." I chuckled. "Ah," Floggin said as he put his plate on the ground. "I had to go into town to get some pipe tobacco yesterday, so I rented the mule and cart. Thought I'd bring you two some supplies and see if you had anything for me to bring back," he said while stuffing his pipe, which now had a thin leather strap tied to it that went around his neck. "Well, that was very thoughtful, Floggin. Thank you," I said. "Oh, I'll add it to your bill, Sergeant," he said, smiling and puffing on his pipe. "Speaking of tobacco," Floggin continued, "the last box of these were sitting on the store clerk's shelf right next to my fine green apple tobacco. Can you imagine, Sergeant? I figured I'd buy him out, not wanting to attract more dog faces to our little neck of the woods." And he threw me a box of cigars. "Why, thank you, Floggin. Like the green apple, do you?" I asked as I put my cigars away. "Oh, Martha threatened to have my head if I came home with any other kind. Can you imagine, Sergeant? Speaking of smoke, my tent is on fire. Or have the two of you not noticed? Sergeant turned it into a smokehouse, Daddy. Kylie smiled. Did he really? Floggin asked as he got up to pop his head in the tent and take a look. Holy crap, from Floggin. Both Kylie and I broke out into a silent laugh. Floggin came out composed and quietly determined not to show that my little joke got to him. That's a hell of a lot of meat. Brilliant idea, Sergeant, he complimented. Thank you, Floggin. And we got another one to skin and cut up. Over there, I pointed. Floggin looked and saw the bear on the tree and the fire still smoldering beside it. Ah, smoked it overnight to get the pelt off. Did Kylie show you that trick, Sergeant? One of her grandfathers, he said. That old man was not going to get me this time without even looking at Kylie, I said. Yes, she did, and I was grateful to learn it too. Seeing Chili coming back from the river right behind Floggin, I asked, Are you in a hurry, Floggin? Not especially, no, Sergeant. Why? He questioned. Good, then you won't mind keeping Chili company while Kylie and I go take care of that kill. Kylie, grab the mule and cart, I ordered as I grabbed the bone saw and skinning knife. And mind you, don't let him rub his face on anything, Floggin. Bee stings, I ordered as I walked away laughing, with Kylie pulling up beside me quietly chuckling. We could hear Floggin as we walked away. Good. Bear, nice. Bear! Kylie, looking back at her father to see him trying to pet Chili nervously, waited till we were out of earshot to say, Oh, that was just mean, Sergeant. She stated as she chuckled. You heard what he said about not wanting dog faces in his neck of the woods? He deserved it. I said and smiled. When I get into the academy, will Daddy call me a dog face too, Sergeant? Kylie asked. If you get into the academy, and no, Kylie, you will be an officer. Dog faces are just enlisted men and women, I said. Now, Kylie, before I waste my time once again, do you know how to skin a bear? I asked seriously. Yes, Sergeant, Grandpa showed me, she replied. Good, then this will be quick. Here you take my skinning knife. I'll use my tanto, and we'll be done in no time, I said. What's a tanto? Kylie asked. I turned my back to Kylie and said, It's a small knife that is a part of your belt at your back, I said, and pulled it out to show Kylie. I never even noticed that, she said, astonished. Good. You're not supposed to. It's a Kingsguard's last defense, I said as I handed it to Kylie. See how it looks like it's bent? That's so it fits the curve of your back. Always keep it razor sharp, and some soldiers even coat theirs in poison in case they have to take their own life, I instructed. It's got a tiny Kingsguard seal on the blade, Kylie said out loud. You'll get one too if you get into the academy, I said and smiled, and put out my hand for her to give it back, and she put my skinning knife in my hand and smiled. Okay, I said. You can use it, but the blade is curved, so you do the cuts around the paws. Let me do the big cuts, I instructed. She smiled and asked, Is yours coated in poison, Sergeant? No. Kylie, I know exactly where to stick it, should I ever need to take my own life. And so will you, I said. We were making quick work of Kylie's kill. We had it skinned and were cutting up the carcass when I looked over to see Chili licking Floggin's plate on the ground, and Floggin hopped off, and about 4 feet over from the tree stump he was sitting on. I cupped my hands over my mouth and yelled, Don't feed him cooked meat. Floggin cupped his hands and yelled, I didn't feed it to him. He took it. Sergeant? Kylie said, looking concerned. Oh, Kylie, little cooked meat won't hurt Chili. Besides, he didn't take it because he was hungry. He's just trying to piss off your father. Chili hates people who are family, acting nervous around him, I said. She nodded and went back to work. A few minutes later, Floggin yelled over, Sergeant, he's scratching. I looked up, and Chili was scratching his face on the tree stump where Floggin had been sitting. Kylie, go take care of that, I asked. And like a shot, Kylie was gone, and over at the camp, pushing Chili away from the stump, saying, Go fish, Chili, go fish, then gave Floggin a disapproving look and said, Daddy, really? Then ran back to the kill to finish our work. Well, I guess the disapproval from his daughter was all Floggin needed to man up. And he grabbed Kylie's rod and my tackle box and marched after Chili, determined not to be afraid of that bear, even if it killed him. Chili had made it down all the way to the rapids and was fishing off the bank with his head in the water. Floggin plopped his ass on the bank right beside him and started fishing himself. We finished cutting up the bear and headed back to camp with the wagon full of meat and dragging the rest of the bear carcass behind the cart for Chili's lunch. Reaching camp, Kylie told me to go fish with her father and Chili, and she would fill the cart from the smokehouse. But what about the pelt? I asked. I'll do that too. Go fish, she instructed. I guess she thought it important that Floggin and I bonded, so I did as instructed and grabbed my rod and her tackle box and headed to the rapids. When I got to within hearing distance of Floggin and Chili, Chili was poking Floggin in the back with his nose and almost sending him into the water. Just let me get the hook out. You blasted bear! There, said Floggin, annoyed. And a trout came sailing backward up over Floggin and Chili and into the field with Chili right behind it. Laughing, I came up to Floggin, put down Kylie's tackle box, picked up mine, and said, That's mine. Then sat on the other side of Floggin. That's an interesting game you two have going, I said as I chuckled. No game, he's just flat out mugging me for my fish, and that was the third one. Floggin said as he chuckled back. Ah, I have come to your rescue, my friend, I said, then yelled, Chili, go see Kylie. She has lunch for you. And Chili took off for the camp. Kylie got her bear, right there yesterday, and I pointed about 3 feet in front of Floggin. Really? He said. Yes, these rapids seem to be a good spot. We've got both bears here, I said. But no worries, Floggin. I was at their cave last evening, and the alpha is keeping her sleuth close to home for at least another week, I said as I cast my line. So you and Kylie are going to stay another week? Floggin asked. Well, we could, thanks to you coming and resupplying us and emptying our smokehouse for us. But no, I think we'll stick to the plan, do a little fishing and small game hunting for another day or so on this side of the river, and leave the bears, what's left of them, alone for a month or so, I said as we fished. Perhaps you'll come for the next trip, Floggin? I asked with a smile. I'll come to visit, Sergeant. Besides, I want another crack at these rapids with my fly fishing rod. He said with his pipe in his mouth, Well, I was ordered by your daughter to come fish with you, so I'd say for both our safety, we better stay put for at least another half hour, I said as we chuckled. When we headed back to camp, almost an hour later, Kylie had the pony cart stuffed full of meat and the pelt from our first bear covering it all, and it all tied and ready to go. We could also smell the lunch of bear tenders and beans, and a pot of coffee going. We quickened our pace to the camp. As we got there, Kylie was knelt over the fire cooking lunch and said, pointing at the cart, Daddy, the meat at the front of the cart has to go into the smokehouse first. It's my bear from yesterday. Yes, Pumpkin. Tell me about your kill, Floggin requested, as he poured himself a coffee. During lunch, Kylie regaled us on the stories of both kills and unable to help herself. The story of my first earring to wit Floggin got a good laugh out of. After lunch, Floggin got up, gave his daughter a hug, and said, Daddy loves you, Pumpkin. Sergeant, take care of that ear now. Don't want it infected. And chuckled and mounted his ass. I walked over to him and offered him 4 gold for his trouble, to which he held up his hand and said, No. No more gold from you, Sergeant. With the meat and what you're doing for my daughter, you're no longer a guest. You're family, he said, and started to ride away. That means you make your own bed, fetch your own water, and feed your own bear, he yelled back, then yelled, Goodbye, bear, and he was gone over the hill. Chapter number 17. Goodbye, brother. Speaking of bears, I looked around for Chili and spied him rubbing his face on the hollow log by the cleaning tree. Kylie, I said, and pointed at Chili, and she took off like a shot over to him. I watched as she pushed Chili away from the log and pointed to the river and said something. I figured it was Kylie's turn to enjoy herself for a little while, so I took the lunch dishes to the river to clean them. When I got back, Kylie was still over by the hollow log, knelt down beside it, looking like she was talking to it. I put down the dishes, took my bow off my back, and walked over. As I got close, I heard Kylie speaking. Come on out. I won't hurt you. I want to get a look at you to make sure you're okay, she encouraged. Come on out, please. And a baby bear's head popped out of the log. There you are. Come on, Kylie said happily. I crouched down in the tall grass and notched an arrow. As he slowly pulled his fat body out of the hollow tree, I thought to myself as I crept closer, Baby, my ass. This bear had to be 5 to 6 months old and a good 80 pounds. While Kylie talked to him and complimented his coat, I snuck in close enough to get a shot, and calmly I said, "Good work, Kylie. Now get out of the way." Surprised, she turned and saw me 10 feet in front of her with my bow drawn. "No, Sergeant!" She yelled and started crying and threw her arms around the bear. "Please, Sergeant, don't kill him, please," she begged. Yearn from the bear. "He'll starve, Kylie, move," I ordered. "No, Sergeant. He eats bugs and berries and grass and mice. He has not drunk from his mother in weeks. He talks to me, Sergeant. Stronger than chili, please." She again pleaded. "You're making that up. Now move." I insisted. I could have taken the shot with her there, but a part of me didn't want to. A part of me wanted Kylie to fight for this bear. Besides, if I shot and she moved or tried to stop the arrow, she would get hurt. So I held firm. "Oh, really, Sergeant?" She stood and walked right in front of my arrow to me, while the bear quickly turned and popped back inside the log. "I'll prove it to you," she said angrily with tears still streaming down her cheeks. I dropped down my bow but kept it ready. "Little bear, what do you know of this man?" she asked, looking straight into my eyes. Yearn, echoed from the log. "He was there when you shot his mother. He was behind you in the tall grass when you popped out of the river." Yearn from the log. "The big white bear came and took his mother. The girl knelt in the grass 2 feet in front of me but didn't see me." Kylie continued to talk while echoes from the hollow tree fired out quickly. "He followed the two of us back as we talked, and when we took off running for the camp, he made a mad dash for the hollow log here. When he heard you yell loud, he thought you spotted him and crouched deep into the log. He's been here ever since. He knows he can't go home. Set Tai will kill him if he does," Kylie said with her hands on her hips. "This is all stuff you know. Kylie, now move." I pushed her out of the way and raised my arrow and aimed for the hollow log that was still yearning. "You burned your hand," Kylie screamed. I looked at her and dropped my bow down. "What?" I said. "When you came in the morning before you skinned his mother, you burned your hand on the fire," Kylie said, crying again. There was no way she could know that. I thought to myself. I straightened up and faced Kylie. "What are the 3 rules for having an animal companion?" I barked out. "What?" Kylie said while wiping her eyes. I turned and raised my arrow in the direction of the log. Okay, she said and put her hand on my bow arm. "Never feed it cooked food, only raw or smoked." "Go on," I ordered, dropping my bow a bit. "Never feed it from your hand, always drop its food in front of it," she continued, her voice becoming more assured. "Third and most important rule, Miss Floggin," I ordered. "Never do anything for it, which it can do for itself, Sergeant." She said confidently she got it right. I put my bow all the way down and released the tension. "Congratulations, Miss Floggin. You now have a hollow log. Take care of it," I ordered. "Oh, thank you, Sergeant. Thank you." And she threw her arms around me and hugged me. "I didn't do you any favors, Kylie. Chili's going to kill it. And even if he doesn't, your father is not a fan of bears," I warned. "Little Bear says Chili knew he was here 2 days ago," Kylie said. "Well, knowing he was here and bringing him into our camp is 2 very different things. Chili is a very old and jealous bear. He attacks my mounts, for Pete's sake," I warned. "Now see if you can get him to come out. I want to look at him," I said. "Put your bow on your back first, Sergeant, please," Kylie asked suspiciously. I chuckled. "All right," and I put my bow on my back and put my arrow back in its quiver. Kylie ran over to the hollow log and knelt down beside it. "Come on out. You're a part of our sleuth now," she said happily. "Come on, please." The little bear popped its head out, then slowly squeezed itself out of the log. Kylie hugged and petted the bear as it yearned at her. I slowly walked over and knelt down on the other side of the bear. "He's big, Kylie. The way he acts, he's still a baby, but he's a big baby. Look at his paws," I said as I gently lifted one of his front paws into the air. "No wonder there were no baby prints on the trail. I mistook him for a small female," I said. "Little baby big paws," I said and smiled. "Oh, I like that," Kylie said. "Little Sergeant Big Paw," she said as she petted him and smiled. "Don't go naming him till we see what Chili does, and if Chili kills him, don't say I didn't warn you," I said sternly. Kylie nodded and went back to bonding with her bear. "I'll go warn Chili. You stay and bond with your bear, and Kylie, remember the 3 rules. They may save your life one day," I said, and I left. Running off to go find Chili, I caught up with him at the rapids fishing. I called him over to me and checked his face to see it was healing nicely and sat him down to have a chat about Kylie and her new bear. I made sure to tell him that the little bear was Kylie's companion, not mine, and if he loved Kylie, he would not hurt it. And for extra insurance, I told him how Kylie and her new bear were going to be king's guards and how she and her bear would be our brothers in arms. He hiffed and grumbled but stayed calm and looked like he would behave himself. So we headed back to camp to meet up with Kylie and her bear. When we got back to camp, Kylie was checking Lil Sergeant for ticks by the fire. "How is he?" I asked. "I found 2 so far, but almost done," Kylie replied. "So Kylie, how would you feel about 2 more days? Doing some fishing, and I want to get a few foxes and a nice deer or 2, so we're not eating bear for 6 months straight," I said and smiled. "Sure, I'd love to stay, and we got enough supplies plus a full keg of ale, and you have a full box of cigars, and I have to finish tanning the second skin tomorrow, so yes, please," she said while looking over Lil Sergeant. "So, Sergeant, I saved us 2 bear roasts in the smokehouse." "Roast for dinner for all?" Kylie asked, finishing with her bear and washing her hands. "No," I said. "Kylie, you're not feeding that bear, not yet," I ordered. "You feed Chili," she said. I got up and stomped over to her and pointed at Chili. Chili is a trained bear, a King's Guard trained bear, and he has earned his meals 1,000 times over. He's saved countless lives, including His Majesty's and my own many times over. Chili sat up on his fat ass and started waving his paws in the air. I looked over at Chili and said, "Relax, hero. I was just making a point." And Kylie didn't help by running over to him and scratching his belly. "Oh, he's a hero, isn't he? Who's my beautiful hero?" she said as she pampered Chili. "Kylie," I said firmly, then softened my voice. "Look at Lil Sergeant." Little Sergeant Big Paw had curled himself in a ball with his back facing Kylie and looking over his shoulder at her. "Bears are very jealous creatures, Kylie. I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to keep some distance from Chili while you're training your bear," I said sadly. Kylie nodded and whispered something in Chili's ear and ran over to Lil Sergeant, picked him up and started tossing him in the air and playing with him. I went over to Chili and scratched his belly. "I think it's time Lil Sergeant learned to fish. What do you think, Chili?" I asked. Yowl, hiff, hiff, and a nod from Chili. After gathering up our fishing gear, Kylie pulled up beside me on my right, and with my left hand I pointed to my left and a little in front and barked. "Chili, left guard." Chili pulled up to my left right where I was pointing, ducked low to the ground, gave a very serious yowl, and started sweeping his head back and forth. I looked at Kylie and said, "Kylie." She nodded and pointed to her right and a little in front and barked. "Lil Sergeant, right guard." Little Sergeant Big Paw took 2 steps, looked at Kylie, then looked at Chili, took 2 more steps, so he was in line with Kylie's finger ducked low to the ground, gave out his best yearn, and started sweeping his head like Chili. It was too cute. I almost burst out laughing, but I composed myself and looked at Kylie, who looked like a proud mama, and said, "Good," then barked. "Forward, march!" And we all headed to the rapids information. On our way to the rapids, Kylie asked, "Sergeant, how did Chili save the king?" I figured I had been a little hard on Kylie all day, so I'd remedy that with an amusing story and told her the Goldshire troll story and continued into how Valdor lost half his ass to Chili. "Are Valdor and Chili friends now?" Kylie asked amused. "I think so. But if you ask Valdor, he will say he wants Chili dead. But he does not mean it." I chuckled. Arriving at the rapids and dismissing everyone from the formal parade, Kylie and I sat on the bank and got our rods ready while Chili waded into a shallow spot, then yowled to get Lil Sergeant's attention and swatted the river with his huge paw, and 2 fish came sailing up out of the water and onto the bank. Lil Sergeant ran up to the big one, grabbed it in his mouth, then ran about 10 yards back from the bank and ate it. Chili left the other one flopping on the bank and stuck his head in the water to get himself a good-sized meal. "See, Kylie, Chili just did your job for you," I said and laughed. Kylie cupped her hands over her mouth and yelled, "Thank you, Chili." As the day went on, I was elated to find my green shiny glass lure was catching yellowtail, my favorite meal, one right after the other. Kylie was getting a mixture of trout and small salmon and a sagefish or 2. Chili was gulping down anything that came over the rapids. And even Lil Sergeant got the hang of swatting fish onto the bank with his big paws. He wouldn't always get there before the fish flopped back into the water, but he was doing better than average, and providing some pretty funny entertainment. Bored of fishing, Lil Sergeant decided he wanted to play with Chili, and while Chili's head was underwater, Lil Sergeant went over and started pulling at Chili's collar. Chili leaped out of the water onto his back paws with his claws out and in full attack mode, and rower! Lil Sergeant went running with his tail between his legs and yearning to beat the band out of the water up the bank and climbed up Kylie's back. I stood quickly and grabbed Lil Sergeant and threw him off Kylie. Correct your bear, I ordered to Kylie. Kylie needed no inspiration. She was pissed. She stood marched over and bent over in front of him and swatted him hard on the nose and ordered, "You do not climb on mommy." "On family," I interrupted. Kylie repeated to him, shaking her finger at him, "You do not climb on the family." Lil Sergeant yearned and licked her boot. Kylie's face softened and she put her hand behind his butt and pushed him in the direction of the river, says, "Go fish!" Then came and sat beside me. I looked at her back. Her buckskins were torn and she was bleeding in several spots, but nothing serious. "You're lucky," I said. "Another week and 20 pounds, and that bear would have seriously wounded you." I warned. "I think you should think about wearing double buckskins while training that bear." "Way ahead of you, Sergeant," she said. "I've just been giving myself shit for not putting them on already." I nodded as we noticed a very pungent odor hit the air. "You," Kylie said and held her nose looking at me. "Not me," I said, and looked around and we saw a trail of baby bear shit that leads from the river to the right, behind Kylie. "I guess Chili scared the shit out of him, literally." I chuckled. "Well, time to move. I'm happy with my quota. Back to camp?" I asked. Kylie nodded, still holding her nose. We marched back to camp in the same formation, and arriving, I dismissed parade, then rubbed Chili's head, saying, "Good boy," and Kylie did the same to Lil Sergeant. I went to go clean all the fish. Kylie went to change out of her torn buckskins and put on a thick sweater and a fresh set of buckskins over top. Chili flopped himself down by the fire, and I guess Lil Sergeant went to curl up next to him and rower. I turned just in time to see Lil Sergeant running with his tail between his legs, right at Kylie, who pointed at the tree beside her, and Lil Sergeant went scurrying up the tree, yearning to beat the band. Kylie looked at me and smiled, and I nodded and said, "Good," and went back to cleaning the fish. With all the fish cleaned, I skewered 3 yellowtail onto an arrow and spaced them evenly and hung it over the fire, then put the biggest salmon in the pan by the fire for Kylie and went into the smokehouse to hang the rest of the fish. I yelled out to Kylie, "These 2 roasts, are they from the same bear?" "No," she yelled back. "The bigger one is from your kill, and the smaller one from mine." I came out of the smokehouse with the big roast and my other hand behind my back, threw down the big roast in front of Chili and said, "Good job today." Then walked over to Kylie and, pulling my hand from my back, put a good chunk of the other roast in her hand without either of the bears noticing, then said, "Of course, he's not my bear, but your Lil Sergeant did well today. Despite a few mistakes, he learned quickly and only needed to be told once. If he were my bear, I'd reward him." I said, smiled, and walked away to go tap the new keg of ale. She smiled and said, "Thank you, Sergeant." I watched as she ordered Lil Sergeant down from the tree and pointed to the ground in front of her all the time, keeping the meat behind her back. She gave him a good speech about how well he did and how he needs to listen to her if he ever wanted to be a Kingsguard bear. She then pulled the roast from her back, laid it in front of him, stood and said, "You may eat now," then sat against the tree and watched. I found myself not pouring the ales, but instead watching her bear with a big smile on my face, as he, instead of gulping down the meat, held it high in his teeth and pranced around with it. Walking around the tree and Kylie holding the meat high, looking extremely pleased with himself, then started prancing in Chili's direction. My smile dropped, but before I could say anything, Kylie said, "Lil Sergeant, eat over here." Chili raised his head and growled, and Lil Sergeant turned quickly and pranced back to Kylie, playing with his reward for a few more minutes before he ate it. Chuckling to myself, I was having a hard time holding the mug still as I poured us an ale. I took an ale over to Kylie, then headed over to the fire with mine, sat on the ground beside the fire, facing Kylie, with my back leaning against Chili. Sipping my ale and waiting for my fish, I said to Kylie, "You know, Kylie, if you get in, taking that bear to the academy with you is severely going to limit your options." I warned. "How do you mean, Sergeant?" she asked. "Well, only hunter class are allowed animal companions. See, mages and paladins, and monks are usually kept close to the king and the royal diplomats after they graduate. Warriors and hunters are usually sent to take charge of some far-off guard post or garrison. By taking that bear with you, you're pretty much going to be deep in the shit for your entire career. No fancy balls, and galas for you," I said, and sipped my ale. Kylie got a big smile on her face and said, "Really, Sergeant? Did you hear that, little Sergeant Big Paws? We're going to have a life of adventure and fun," she said as she scratched her bear. Laughing out loud, I said, "Remember you said that," and took another sip of my ale. After a wonderful meal, I threw another 2 logs on the fire so the warmth would reach the tree where Kylie and her bear now called home. She had her warm blanket on the ground next to the tree and was sitting cross-legged on it, with her bear curled up in front of her, just loving the attention he was getting. I took the last cigar from the old box and gave Kylie the honor of the first cigar from a fresh box and poured us each another ale, then sat by the fire leaning against Chili. "Are you warm enough over there?" I asked Kylie. "We're fine. You old folks keep your fire. We'll do just fine with my soft, warm blanket," she teased as she smiled. "Have you thought about where you're going to put Lil Sergeant when we get home?" I asked, and sipped my ale. "Well, the only thing left in the old shed is an old plow. Maybe if I can put that somewhere, Daddy will let me have the shed for Lil Sergeant, and I'll set it up like I did Chili's stall." "An old plow, you say?" I asked. She nodded. "Why?" she asked. "Well, I'm thinking if we plowed a nice small field with an irrigation ditch and fence for a garden for your mother, might go a long way into getting you your shed," I said as I puffed my cigar. "Do you know how?" Kylie asked. "Well, we got the muscle right here," I said, and put my arm across Chili, patting him. "The rest we can figure out, I'm pretty sure," I said, and smiled with my cigar in my mouth. "Oh, that would be awesome, Sergeant. Mom's been talking about extending her garden for years." She smiled back, drank her ale, and put out her cigar, saving it, and wrapped herself in her blanket with Lil Sergeant curled up to her belly, lying on the blanket. "Good night, Sergeant," Kylie said. "Good night, Kylie," I returned. Looking at Lil Sergeant, it was then I realized it must have been him who left the warm spot on the blanket this morning. He must have chosen Kylie long before she chose him. That's when I knew these two would be destined to spend their lives together. And that made me feel Kylie had indeed stumbled upon her path in life. Looking up at the stars while everyone slept and I quietly smoked my cigar, I wondered where my path would lead me, and if it would ever lead me back to Nimicie. In the morning, I awoke to the sound of Lil Sergeant yearning and licking Kylie's face while she tried to scoot him off and get a few more minutes' sleep. I sat up and said, "Kylie, your bear is hungry. He wants you to go get breakfast with him." Kylie pushed off Lil Sergeant and got up and headed for the fire pit, grabbed the coffee pot, then turned and headed for the falls. Lil Sergeant started running in the direction of the rapids, and Kylie corrected his behavior, saying, "Stop, Lil Sergeant. We're going to the falls. There are frogs and berries there. You'll have to make do. I'm not going anywhere till I've had my coffee." Chuckling to myself, I went over to the keg and poured myself some breakfast and threw a log on the fire. Then went in the tent and got a sagefish for Chili. Threw it down in front of him and said, "Up, Chili, we're burning daylight." Well, sort of. Since the sun wasn't technically up yet, Kylie came marching back by herself, made coffee and put it on the fire and flopped down on her ass, lifted her knees to her chest, put her arms across them and laid her head on her crossed arms. "Better keep an eye on Lil Sergeant. There are still bears in the area," I warned, but smiling to myself. Kylie lifted her head, looked at me, and put her thumb under her bowstring across her chest and very grumpily said, "It's 25 yards from here to the fall, Sergeant. I could make that shot in my sleep," and laid her head back on her knees. "Could you? Well, let's just see." I put down my ale, stood behind Kylie, and lifted her to her feet, then tied my handkerchief over her eyes and turned her in the direction of the falls. "Make ready your bow," I ordered, and marched to the river, found a birch tree, and stood beside it. Kylie, there is a birch tree 2 feet to my left. Aim, fire! And before I got the last word completely out of my mouth, there was an arrow in the tree dead even with the center of my head. Again! I ordered, and another directly below it. Determined to make her miss, I quickly switched sides of the tree. Again, and even though my voice came from the other side of the tree, her arrow split the first arrow right down the shaft. I'll be damned! I said out loud and marched back to the camp, pulled off the blindfold and said, You've earned 10 more minutes sleep as you were, I said and grabbed my ale and sat down at the fire. Kylie flopped down on her ass and resumed her position only now with her bow in her hand. 2 minutes later, Lil Sergeant came running up to Kylie, knocked her over and dropped a frog on her face. With a scream and in the blink of an eye, Kylie was up and the frog had an arrow through it. I laughed and said, Oh, you better eat it. He's sharing his breakfast with you. And fell over laughing. Still laughing and lying in the dirt, I said, Now that it's skewered, put it on the fire. Kylie pulled the arrow out of the ground, squeezed off the frog in front of Lil Sergeant, and said, No, thank you, sweetie. I'll just have coffee. You eat it, but thank you, and scratched his ear. Lil Sergeant gobbled up the frog and ran off back to the falls, with Chili lumbering in behind off for his morning drink. Sitting up and wiping the tears from my eyes, I warned, Chili, behave. The coffee pot stopped perking with a resound, Finally! From Kylie as she poured herself a cup. What's wrong with you today? I asked. Usually you're the one who put the morning in morning person. Kylie sipped her coffee and yawned, then said, Not only can I talk with Lil Sergeant, but I hear and see his dreams as well. It's going to take some getting used to. And took another sip of coffee. Did you get any sleep? I asked. A little, but for at least half the night I was a happy little bear playing in the grass, she said, gulping her now cool coffee. Yeah, that's called hunter's vision. Very few people have it. And if you get into the academy, you'll learn how to control it and use it for a number of animals, I said, getting up and pouring a second mug of breakfast. Did you go to the academy, Sergeant? Kylie asked. No, I trained at Northshire with all the other enlisted men and women, but I did end up teaching at the academy for 4 years while His Majesty attended, I said. Really, Sergeant? What did you teach? Kylie asked, pouring herself a second cup of coffee. Physical education and marksmanship, I answered proudly. So, a drill sergeant, Sergeant, she said with a smile. That does explain a lot, she teased. So Daddy was right calling you a dog face. You are the doggiest of faces. And she giggled to herself. I joined in the laugh and said, I suppose so, Kylie. I could run you and Lil Sergeant through some drills after breakfast. Could save your life someday, and I'm sure would impress your instructors if you get in, I asked. Oh, yay, from Kylie. Yes, please. Well, after a nice breakfast was had by all, I lined Kylie and Lil Sergeant up for a few commands and parade routines they would use once they got into the academy. While Chili sat his fat ass behind the two of them and watched. I thought the two of them were doing very well for their first time, but Chili for some reason thought differently and pulled into formation on the other side of Kylie. I would bark out an order and all three would follow it. Only Chili would yowl at Lil Sergeant, and he would return a yearn to Chili. And after a few more exercises, Kylie finally put her hands over her ears and yelled, Stop it! The two of you. Attention! I barked, and all the noise stopped. I marched over to Kylie and asked, What the hell is going on? Oh, Chili is telling Lil Sergeant he's not doing it right, and he's going to get me kicked out before I even start. And Lil Sergeant is saying he's doing his best and calling Chili a dick. Wait, I said. You can understand Chili now? Well, I understand Lil Sergeant better, but when them being that close and loud, I understand Chili through Lil Sergeant. I can't explain how. Okay, Kylie, I said and stood in front of Chili. Chili, you keep your opinions to yourself. I appreciate your trying to help, but tell me you've never made a mistake. A muffled yowl from Chili. I then did a quarter turn and marched up and in front of Lil Sergeant and said, If you have any hopes of being Kylie's animal companion and a Kingsguard bear, you will listen to that dick, because he is a Kingsguard bear and is only trying to help you. You got that? I barked. Yearn, from Lil Sergeant. That's enough for today. Parade dismissed, I ordered. Lil Sergeant turned around and headed for the blanket under the tree with one last yearn, and Kylie, shocked and let out a gasp, said, Lil Sergeant, where did you learn that word? And marched after him while looking back at me, saying, He called you an asshole. As she continued marching towards him, saying, You come back here, young man. We have to talk about your attitude. With Chili shaking his head at me and Kylie and her bear heading to the tree, I looked at Chili and chuckled and said, I've been called worse. I went over and scratched Chili's ear. What do you say, brother? You want to go deer hunting? An eager nod. Yes. And we were off for the day. As we left Kylie and Lil Sergeant back at camp, Chili and I headed deep into the wooded area on our side of the river. I kind of feel sorry for that little bear, I said to Chili, starting a conversation as we walked. Kylie reminds me a lot of Nimicie, and her mother Martha reminds me a lot of Mom. Hiff, from Chili. Chuckling, I said. Lil Sergeant is going to get his ear chewed off for half the day, I bet. Hiff, from Chili as he nodded, and I laughed. I know you don't like him much, but do you trust him? I asked. Chili stopped, looked right at me, and gave a hiff. Good. I do too, I said as we continued. It was later in the day before we bagged our first kill. Chili spotted the deer first, but let me take the kill. A good-sized 6-point buck. And while I hung and gutted the buck, Chili went off to get his own supper and came back as usual as the work was done with Does head in his teeth dangling from one of her ears out of his mouth, as Chili pranced right by me. I can see you're going to be a lot of help, I said as I hoisted the buck onto my shoulders and held the legs in my hands. Okay, you take point, I said, and we headed back for camp. We came out of the thick brush closer to the cleaning tree than to camp, but I could see Kylie and Lil Sergeant playing. Chili took off to go show off his new ball, and I yelled over to Kylie. Kylie, bring over the hanging rope, please. Okay, Sergeant. She yelled back, got the rope, and jogged in my direction. Reaching the cleaning tree at the same time as Kylie, I noticed 2 gutted and skinned foxes hanging from a thick branch. Well, you've been busy, haven't you? I said with a smile as she handed me the rope. We actually got 3, but Lil Sergeant ate one, and then played with the head for the rest of the day, Kylie said, as she went around the other side of the tree to tie it off as I lifted the deer up and held it against the tree. Graduated from bugs and berries to fish, frogs, and foxes in one day. Impressive, I teased. I may have put an arrow into his fox, just to slow it down, she confessed and smiled. I laughed. The buck had already been gutted, so this was going to be quick work to skin it and cut it up into roasts. And as Kylie and I started skinning the deer, Chili with his ball and Lil Sergeant right behind him came running around the tree, then back out into the field. Lil Sergeant came back and ran up the backside of the cleaning tree beside Kylie and started yearning. Kylie, quickly dropping her knife and taking off her bow and notching an arrow, stated, What? Where? I took my cue from Kylie and did the same. What's going on? I asked. Set Ty is here, he says. Your alpha female. Where, Lil Sergeant? Kylie said, scanning the thick brush behind us with her bow drawn. There? Chili has her, I said as I spotted Chili, who had dropped his ball and was hiffing at a thick patch of grove not 10 yards in front of him. Cover me, I said to keep Kylie out of danger as I was going to get closer to Chili. Yearn yearn, from the tree. Wait, Sergeant, she's not here for us. She's here for Chili, Kylie said quickly as she dropped the aim of her bow to the ground and loosened the tension. Turning my head to look at Kylie, but keeping my bow ready in front of me, I asked, What? She doesn't think she can, Kylie interrupted me. She's here to ask Chili to be her mate, her king. As she spoke, Lil Sergeant climbed down from the tree and took up a guard position beside Kylie. In shock, I turned directly to Kylie and dropped my bow down to my side, almost sending my arrow into the dirt. What? I said in disbelief. Kylie was crouched by the tree with her bow ready on her knees. She nodded her head forward for me to turn around and watch Chili. I turned to face Chili and knelt down with my bow in front of me, ready, but aimed at the ground. With Chili hiffing and grunting, Setai stepped out of the thick grove slowly. A huge, beautiful black mountain grizzly almost over half Chili's size, the biggest mountain grizzly I had ever seen. She started yowling and hiffing at Chili, but also keeping a close eye on me and Kylie. Setai sniffed the air and stomped her front paws and yowled at Chili again. Chili looked at me with a sad look on his face, then hiffed. turned back to set tie, and yowled and stomped back. Kylie said softly but loud enough for me to hear about 10 yards away from her. She's asking him to go, and he's telling her he can't. He owes you a life debt. You could hear the cracking in Kylie's voice as if she was holding in her tears. Kylie, cover me, I asked softly. I slowly stood, and Set Tai raised herself to her back paws but kept her front paws in front of her in a warning stance. I slowly laid my bow and arrow on the ground and stepped over them, and with my palms facing the bears, I slowly started walking toward Chili. Easy, Set Tai. Easy, big girl. I just want to talk to my brother Chili, I said slowly and calmly, and I kept repeating as I slowly closed the gap of 20 yards or so between me and Chili, kneeling down beside Chili and putting one hand on his head to scratch his ear, but never taking my eyes off the huge, beautiful grizzly. She came back down on all fours and hiffed once more. I guess with Kylie and Leal Sargent so close, she could understand what I was saying, because she didn't run or try to attack, just held her ground and patiently waited to get Chili's answer. She is a beautiful brother, I said to Chili quietly and calmly, but never taking my eyes off the huge grizzly. You know, Chili, I'm old and retired. There will be no more adventures or battlegrounds for me. I'll probably spend the rest of my life fishing and getting fat off Martha's cooking. I continued. But she can offer you the greatest adventure of all, a family with cubs. Little Chilies running all over and around you, looking for you to teach them to hunt, fish, and protect themselves. Sounds like a wonderful life to me, brother. I chuckled softly as I scratched his ear, and he grunted. Any life debt you think you owe me has been paid 1,000 times over, and I will never forget your friendship and what you mean to me. And because I love you, I want the best for you. Taking my eyes off of the grizzly for a second to put my head against Chili's. Now, you have a beautiful lady asking for your help and love. As a king's guard, you cannot refuse the request of a lady in need. Go to her, brother. I'll be around if you need me. Go, and for once, finally be free. Taking my head away from Chili's, I returned my gaze to the grizzly and said aloud, Go! And pushed Chili's head towards her. Then slowly stood. And Chili walked over to his lady and sniffed her, and they both started licking each other's faces. I heard crying behind me and turned for a second to see Kylie and Lil Sargent right behind me, tears streaming down Kylie's face. Turning back towards the bears, Chili stood on his back paws looking at me and yowl, hiff, hiff, he said, and disappeared into the thick grove with his lady, his red collar the last thing I saw of my friend, my brother. I slowly turned and looked at Kylie, and choking back the tears, Kylie tried her best to get out a dignified, He said he loves you, brother. I smiled and said, Thank you, Kylie. And as I tried to walk past her to go pick up my bow, she grabbed me and sobbing into my shoulder said, That was the most beautiful thing I ever saw. Then sniffed. I'm so sorry you lost your friend, Sergeant, she said as she continued crying. Hey now, he's not lost, Kylie. He's alive and happy and free, and has the most beautiful lady bear I've ever seen. He's doing better than me. I chuckled, trying to console her. I then gently pushed her off of me, looked her in the eyes, smiled and nodded, and went and picked up my bow. Kylie, could you finish up with the deer? I need to do some fishing alone for a while, I asked, and she nodded. Then Lil Sergeant yearned, and I said, And you guard Kylie. And I left.